Hello and welcome to another episode of Raucus Esports. I will be your driver and your commentator today for another week's worth of, I call them highlights. I'm not 100% sure it is classed as that for last week. So starting off with my first race of the week, I just qualified for a new league, so I was kind of trying out some of the new races that then become available, and this is one of the more advanced Mazda Cups, and the internet broke immediately upon my attempt to join. So always a little bit worrying when everyone disappears around you, and it turned out that my hotspot had turned off and suddenly my connection to the internet had crashed. I did try and carry on once I'd rectified the problem, and yeah, it just got worse. So we'll call this week somewhat of a carnival of errors. It's funny with the lockdown and everything, you go through days where you're feeling more rubbish and less rubbish, and even the smallest things can kind of impact that. And I could definitely sense that with some of the races this week. The tiniest of things just threw you off, and you just couldn't deal with it. So I think there was some quite big chunks of time in between doing these. It took me well into the week to kind of get back into the swing of things. So I hope you're all doing okay. Hopefully you're having more better days than worse days. But yeah, it gets to everyone. This was trying out something a little bit new again, so I was just feeling my way through this new season. This is the Spec Ford races. Feels pretty horrible to drive for the most part. First race, wasn't doing particularly great with it. Not particularly a surprise, but usually I can keep it on the track. But that was the kind of defining points of that race. There wasn't many of them. Next up, went back to the advanced MX-5 Mazda class, tried to do a little bit better this time, which I think I did, only because there was less people in the actual race. Getting knocked around a bit, trying to do something, but I'm still ultimately at the back of the pack, and realistically it stayed that way for the entire time. So not great and not particularly exciting, so I think in a second we'll see that I've pretty much just sped this up because nothing really changes. It was interesting though, as I went through this week editing and getting used to different kind of techniques of editing for, what is relatively a boring subject, which is just cars going around a track. Definitely the earlier mistake-laden parts of it like that, someone just tanking into me, are more interesting than the later ones where I actually start to do better. So I put aside my attempts to edit it to the best first, to give you the best content, because actually the more interesting things to watch are me getting bashed about and everything that happens on the lead up to the boring kind of really good races as you go further on. So you can see there, this is me trying out yet another new race, because every time something bad happened I thought, right, enough of that, let's try something new. And yeah, I didn't even make it to the first corner, it was just totaled. And these felt really good, the radical kind of kit cars, massive power, really cool to drive, but yeah, I didn't really get that far, and I think I was having a bad day because that was the last attempt I had with those. I think the races were quite far between. It's probably like one a day or like something like that, which you definitely notice a drop off when you come out of rookie and start making your way up. This is into C class. The races are definitely more spread out. It's not kind of just you just reload into the next one. There's kind of at least kind of 2 hours in between some of them, if not more. But yeah, so this is back into the Spec Ford. I looked back through my previous results and I could see I had done somewhat better in it than I had anything else. Even despite continued struggles with managing to handle it, it still was this week one of my better ones. And yeah, I think we're about to see I haven't learned anything from my previous attempts. and I think I behave even more badly here. So I've said before, learning what to do in a crash, how to recover it, what to do, when to go to the pits, things like that. Well, here is what you do not do, is pull directly onto a track and then stop. I think fair enough if you've crashed on track and you stop to allow people to go around. It removes kind of inconsistencies, but if you're coming onto a track and you stop, yeah, that was very bad behaviour by me. And at that point, I think I kind of switched gears here. So this is going back into the rookie class MX5 Cup. So a lot lower class of driver. Same track, Laguna Seca, which I don't really like. It doesn't feel like you get a lot of purchase on the corners, I guess because it's sandy. And it just, a lot of the corners just don't feel so satisfying to drive. Managed to navigate quite a lot of other people's mistakes this time, which is quite nice. It is a very pretty track to drive. This section in particular definitely puts a few beads of sweat on your forehead, especially when you're pushing quite hard. It's quite an exciting little bit of the track to drive. And yeah, I've just kind of picked up a 6th place here, which put me a little bit back on a more of an even keel. Made me feel a little bit better about things. Just lost 5th place at the end, but I was okay with that. On the grand scheme of things, it was much better than I had done. This is me making a decision and saying, okay, right, having had a look at what we've done previously and what's available. I really enjoyed the single seaters in the previous league, so I went back to that league and decided to spend a bit of money on race entries for the next couple of races, basically. So Nuremberg was this week, so I bought the track for that. So it does get quite expensive, buying all of the different cars, races. Obviously a minuscule amount in comparison to real racing, but still it does add up. But I'm going to stick with this series, so I've spun for a couple, and I do like the Nuremberg Nordschleife. It's a pretty cool track. Obviously in the previous race you saw I didn't really get very far. First corner someone took me straight out, but I was getting a bit of practice in, so I was okay with that. Again, I think I was still in a patch where I was just like, let's move on again. And one of the other things that was available was, again, it's one of the older leagues I had dabbled in, which is the Fanatec Global Challenge, but I hadn't tried this car, so I went, picked up the Cadillac CTS, and actually it feels pretty nice to drive. I spun for one of this track as well because it's coming up for the Skip Barber single seaters, and Spa-Francorchamps is a fantastic track to drive. There was a lot of me getting overtaken like this to begin with, but it's just good fun. And in these kind of touring cars, there's a lot more play and time to kind of enjoy it. I went back after that to the Skip Barber. They're 10-minute laps of the Nordschleife, so it's quite a lot to remember. You do kind of get to know some of the key points to be careful of. Clearly in that case I had not remembered where the Wall of Champions as I deemed it was. So you can be doing pretty well, and the tiniest of errors just completely sends you, and that's you pretty much done. If you've lost 10 minutes of time being towed back to the pits, that is your race over. Next attempt, after having one just completely lag out on me, which counts as a failure as well, this one was going pretty well. Somehow I wound up in first place. I'm not counting this as a quali first place or pole, because somehow I think no one qualified and I ended up having done a faster sector time. Here I was obviously very aware of the fact I was in first place, very excited, and saw him spin behind me. I think I must have been fist pumping the air because, yeah, span off and immediately tanked myself. Suspension broken here, which you can't quite see, but you can see that people have definitely caught me up immediately. So that was a lesson well learned, and subsequently I thought, well, apart from my mistake, this hasn't gone quite so badly, and actually I ended up in 9th because I limped home. I remembered from one of my previous races, if you don't go too fast you can keep the wheel attached, and I managed to do that for the rest of the lap and just about hold it together to get it to the pits and squeeze out a top 10. Went back to it, I think this was the next day, managed to qualify on 2nd, which I was pretty happy about, and I'm pushing this guy quite hard. Often you do find people who have a faster race pace than they do quali. That's definitely the case for me. My single lap pace isn't always fantastic, but yeah, here we go. Chasing them. They've obviously got a little bit more pace than me at this point, but one thing I do have usually is consistency when I'm good with the car, and yeah, that's pretty much what I'm banking on here, pardon the pun, into the embankment. And yeah, that has come off pretty good for me. Unfortunately, I did get taken a bit later on in the race, but a second on the Nuremberg Nordschleife, which is a pretty savage track. As I say, 10-minute laps of just pure speed and pretty brutal corners and unsighted turns. Yeah, I was quite happy with that. I was going to leave the week there because it had been a pretty bad week of racing for me, and I wanted to leave it on a high, but I thought, well, I do like Spa-Francorchamps, and I've spent the money on it, and the car felt good, so whilst I'm in a positive frame of mind, I thought I would go back and see what I could do. So quite a big grid there, a lot of people, can get quite hairy into some of the corners. I've done quite a bit of practice for this, so I was feeling about as good as I could do for this race, and I'm kind of middling around. I'm in the middle of the shot there, just kind of deciding whether to give up running up into the hill on Eau Rouge. I think I went for kind of taking it a bit easier. I'd rather take a better result than completely bin it all, which seems to work. Kind of following on through the lap, just keeping it clean. And again, end of the week, the more boring races do tend to be the ones where you've got a good result because you're being less negatively affected. Managed to escape a couple of incidents like that, just held the pace, didn't have too many more problems, and that was pretty much just me passing through to the end of the race. Really, just consistency is key, as they always say in racing, and as boring as that is, that's kind of what I'm ending up getting to at the end of a week. So yeah, not the most exciting of racing weeks, but I've narrowed down my path. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll get to see how I progress in the leagues, get to actually look at the kind of scores and see where I end up. So thank you for watching. Can follow us on social media. We do other things as well. Normally we are making games for pubs or putting on entertainment in public, but obviously that doesn't happen at the moment, so this is just something to kind of learn some new editing techniques and play around with some software whilst we do something we enjoy. So